Welcome back. I'm Ruth Ann, and this is For Those Who Care, a podcast dedicated to caregiving. Hospice. What was the first thing you thought of when you heard that word? For most people, it's the idea that the end is near, that it's imminent, sometime within the next few days or maybe even a couple of weeks. But that isn't always the case. In fact, it isn't usually the case. Hospice is so much more than that, provides so many more services. And there are a lot of things that I didn't know when we had to put my husband on hospice. And these are things that I wish I had known because I think it would have made it a lot less scary thinking about hospice because it is end of life care. That is true. But if you're better prepared for it, it may not be as scary as you think it is. So today I have my friend Sharon here, who actually was Lance's hospice nurse. And we do have a little bit of a story how we met and became friends, but we'll do that somewhere throughout this series. This is going to be a two-part series. In this first episode, we're going to talk about understanding hospice care, what it really is. So let's get started. Sharon, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
You're welcome, Ruth Ann. This is a pleasure. Nice to see you.
Can you start by just explaining what hospice care really is, not just being the end of life?
Yeah, let me start off by telling you that hospice is a program that's typically provided by the government or through the government under the umbrella of Medicare, Medicaid, and it can also be provided through insurance companies. Typically, I see it through Medicare. That's been the main source. Um, it's a type of healthcare focused on providing support to people who are terminally ill, providing a quality of life and dignity at the end of life. It involves a team of professionals who manage pain and symptoms while also addressing the emotional, social, and spiritual needs for both the patient and the family. So that's what it is in a nutshell.
So, when is it typically recommended, and what signs or stages of illness might lead a doctor to recommend hospice?
So hospice is typically recommended when patient is diagnosed with a terminal illness and has 6 months or less to live. And that's with the typical trajectory, not give or take, it's not just 6 months. A doctor will most likely make the recommendation when all of the treatments have been exhausted and showing no signs of improvement. Also, when the patient requests to stop all the treatment, so it's not just on the doctor's say, the patient also has an option too. I typically see this in cases with diagnosis of cancer. That's typically what I see.
And that's what my husband had, was cancer, and
Mhm.
he made the decision to stop treatment, and that was when we put him on hospice.
I think a lot of times it's when the patients are just tired. They're tired of doing the same thing, going to the hospital multiple times. You can have like an exacerbation of COPD or chronic heart failure or congestive heart failure. And you've got this 86-year-old that's having to go to the hospital for treatment because that's all they've known. But they're tired of doing it. And so that's usually when it gets to a certain point and they qualify, there's different qualifications, criteria that has to be met. And um, and that's usually when they'd be like, okay, I'm done going to the hospital for this particular thing. I want to stay home and I just want to be treated in the home, managed, in the home, and we go from there. So that's typically the kind of cases I see.
So you mentioned qualifications for getting on hospice care, what would some of those qualifications be?
Um, there's certain criteria that has to be met. They have to be so far into first diagnosed with the terminal illness, and then it has to be like if weight loss, they're like for someone who's on congestive heart failure or COPD, they're on oxygen. They have to require certain kind of medications to relieve the symptoms. Um, they've either got weight loss or weight gain. If they've got edema that's just not controlled anymore, um, their oxygen level is continually requiring other increased levels of oxygen to maintain. They're in the home more. They can't get out as much. So there's lots of different things, but that's typically what we see. Just a digression on their particular illness to the point where they've exhausted everything and it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. And now the doctors decided, yeah, you've probably got about 6 months left to live. So
And like you said, that's not an exact number. It's just what they're looking at in terms of the person's level of health.
mm,
Because I know that Lance lived for 11 months on hospice.
yeah, yeah, it's not. I mean, we've had them when they've literally lived 24 hours, and that's it. And then I've had them and they've been almost 2 years. But as long as it's showing a steady decline, so that when we call it recertification, so typically when they first come on services, they're given 90 days. And after that, we do a face-to-face with the nurse practitioner, and they come in and we requalify them for another 60 days. It's like a 60-day cycle. And in that 60 days, they have to show that there is a decline of some sort. And then that way they within the boundaries of Medicare guidelines, they can stay on services.
I want to step back just a little bit because one of the things that was mentioned to us before we put Lance on hospice was maybe palliative care. And that is different than hospice, but I know that it is in some way related. Can you explain the differences in the two and how they are related?
Yeah, well, hospice is designed to specifically meet the patient's needs with a terminal illness and nearing the end of life. The focus is on the quality of life when curative treatment is no longer an option, whereas palliative care can be provided at any stage of a serious illness. It doesn't necessarily have to be a terminal illness. It can be a chronic issue that they need more visits and more attention to help stabilize and manage the symptoms of that chronic illness. Um, and so the goal is to again still relieve the symptoms, but cases I've seen is when people don't want to be going out to, it's just hard for them to get out and about, and they don't want crazy curative measures, going out and getting CT scans and MRIs and X-rays for curative, further and further. There's like, no, I know I need um, I know I need my edema checked. I need my blood pressure checked. I know it needs to be managed a little more closely. And so they just want comfort, but they don't want to be going out and about for craziness. They just want to stay home in the comforts of their home and have someone come to them and say, yes, Mrs. So-and-so, your edema needs, is increased. Let's increase that Lasix and get that under control, and I'll check back. That kind of thing. So that's the difference. It's still on quality of life, but it's more issue to chronic illnesses than terminal.
Palliative care can be part of home health. It can also be something that patients go into an office for. Is that correct?
You know what? I think so. I think the palliative care that I've seen is just giving the people another option if they don't want to stay. Well, for instance, you can have a situation where people have become managed to the point where they no longer qualify for hospice, but you know that they're not going to go off into the big wide world and start running around and doing things. They're just not meeting the criteria for Medicare to keep them on hospice. So we will invariably say, you know what, there's the option for palliative care, and the doctor will still come to you and they will take care of your needs on that level. So people are like, yes. And then for us specifically, I personally like it because invariably I'll know of the couple of doctors that they go with, and they're aware of their situation and know if they start declining, then they can hand them back to me. And if they know that, then they're more comfortable with the idea of going to palliative care. It still meets their needs, but I'm like a phone call away. So then sending them off back to their doctor, um, especially when the palliative care is like a general practitioner as opposed to you're going back to your cardiologist, your nephrologist, your urologist, and going back to all these 10 specialists out there that you've got to make 10 trips outdoors. It's like, I just want to stay home and, ah, you know, have some peace and quiet and not be bothered. So to me, this is a really good option to have some continuity of care in that direction, but yeah, meets their needs.
That's really good to know. I didn't know that that was an option to go from hospice to palliative care. I think that'll be helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Because sometimes we can be in their home for like 6 months, over, almost to a year. And they've gotten used to us coming into their home and providing all this care. And then all of a sudden, sorry, I can no longer come next week because you haven't, declined to such a the degree that Medicare wants to continue to pay for those services. And you've got someone that's in their 80s and 90s and you're telling them this, and they've now lost connection with who their doctor was and, what that world looked like. So to me, for me as a hospice nurse, having to break that news to them, it's a great comfort to know that that program is out there.
So in that case, is hospice pretty willing to transfer the services over so that they'll still be covered under palliative care? And is that something that the home hospice agency will work with them on getting that paperwork completed?
Usually, yeah, because I usually know who the palliative nurse practitioner or the doctor is, and we will call it in and let them know once we've got the permission from the patient and the family. And they will work with us. We obviously give them all the paperwork, and and they'll let me know when their first visit is, so that then I know when to discharge them. So there is that continuity of care in transferring them from one place to another. So we do work closely with them.
And we're talking about home hospice. So, home hospice is a completely separate agency from the home health care agency that would provide the palliative care.
Yeah, yeah, invariably. Yes.
Can you walk us through how home hospice gets started from that very first appointment where the doctor says, we're going to put you on hospice, or, whatever that appointment is, whether you've decided on hospice, the doctor's decided that you need it. Now you've got to schedule with the home hospice agency to come into your home. How does that work in the beginning? What does it look like? And what do those early days look like?
Yeah, the first thing after receiving a referral from your physician is an appointment that's set by the agency to educate the patient and the family on what hospice service is all about. It- It's to ensure that they are on board with the hospice. We call it the hospice philosophy. It's a lot of time and effort on both parties, and helpful to know if the patients and the family fully understand what things are going to look like forward. We make sure that the patient and family know if for any reason they choose to opt out, that they are free to do so without any judgment. I know a lot of times they feel like, oh, once they sign that dotted line, that's it, they're committed for life, and it's like, no, you can, with a stroke of a pen, you can discharge yourself, it's not written in stone, it's okay. And then if they find later on they really did want hospice or things have just changed, then we can, in most instances, reinstate the patient with the program. So just knowing that they've got that option a lot of times is relief for them. This meeting also gives the agency to ensure the opportunity to ensure that the patient does qualify with the Medicare guidelines. Sometimes when we compare medical records with the assessment made by the agency, it can be two different accounts. I've seen it where they look like on paperwork, it looks like they're at death's door, and it's like, yes, they'll absolutely qualify. And then you go to their house, and it's like, is this, do I have the right patient? It's like this person's walking and talking and doesn't need their oxygen and looks great. And then you find out that they had an exacerbation of a chronic illness in the hospital. It looked like this was it. And then they come home and it's like, oh, I'm actually feeling great right now. And they actually don't meet the criteria. So it's important because, like I said, it's a lot of time and effort just to do an admit. So when the patient and the family have accepted the terms and the set, typically with the social worker and an admitting RN for consent to treat and by the agency, and they're signed at that particular visit. So it's a process, and it's not to be taken lightly. But we like to then take this opportunity to let them know what it all entails. Honestly, I go out there and I find that most people have no idea what hospice is. They didn't even know it was a thing. And they had no idea that it was at their disposal, taxpayers, funded program for them to you and to realize just what it entails. Like I said, it's not just me as the RN, it's the social worker, it's the spiritual, pastor, chaplain, massage therapist even is included, volunteer, this, and above all, this, in my opinion, the CNA. So you've got a lot of people involved in your care, and it's a great program. It really is.
So you mentioned all of those people that come into the home. What kinds of services do those individuals provide? And along with that, beyond medical care, how do you support things like pain management, emotional needs, or even practical help around the home?
So we have, like I said earlier, we have the RN who's a case manager, and we have an aide, certified nurse's assistant, and she provides cares in on the practical basis as far as bathing. She can also do some light housekeeping if it calls for that, even companionship if it's what's needed. Sometimes I've gone in and they, the aide, they're like, oh, they don't want to take a shower right now. They're a little like, I'm a stranger. But she likes say if it's a female and she enjoys having her nails painted. So instead of going in and bathing, she'll go in and paint her nails, and then that way she can become acquainted and then feel more comfortable having having some help with bathing. We have the social worker. They'll help with any uh, resources in the community, help them with legal matters, as in referrals, where to go to get the help in these matters. The chaplain, they're very meet you where you're at. They're not coming in Bible bashing and thumping away, and they meet you where you're at. And if you're agnostic, atheist, but you just need some emotional support, then that's what they're there for. Um, Really good part of the resources there. We've even got massage therapist which, to me, I always feel like they're kind of like a hairstylist. You come out looking great and you feel great with the massage, but you've also unloaded like a psychiatrist, you've unloaded, and so they are definitely there for the emotional side. And I like them when they're allowed in the home because not only do I know they're going to feel good having a nice massage, um, but the massage therapist is good at getting back to me and saying, "Oh, well, while I was there, I noticed blah blah," or to be of help. They're not a spy, but it's like I'm in for so many, 20 minutes, half an hour, and I might only see one side of what's going on, whereas the massage therapist, when she's there, she might see something else that would be helpful for me to know to be, a better service to them. So the aide is that way too, and so is the chaplain, social worker. So we definitely all work together to be a bit of help to these people. That's one of the examples that I gave actually was because we're not just in homes, we can also go into skilled nursing facilities. But this example shows I was in the home at the beginning. She was a 90-year-old, and she was at home. Her caregivers were both her daughter and her son-in-law, and they both passed away in a very short period of time and left her with nobody. And so she did um, qualify to go into a skilled nursing facility. And it was so sad because her whole world just came to crashing down around her. She lost her daughter, her son-in-law, and now she was going into a strange place at 90 odd years old. Family wasn't all around, to be of help to her. And so the social worker and the massage therapist actually we got together and we'll go back to the sacred place. So we wanted to create an environment in this place to be able to help her feel more comfortable. And I knew enough about her being going to visit in her home that she liked pink and purple. And so we got her pink duvet and sheets for her bed. And the facility knew that those were hers. So when they washed, they came back to her room. I know she loved jewelry and makeup, and she always had the walls decorated with her family photos. She had all her belongings in boxes in the room. So the social worker at in fact, she was came and checked, went through her boxes with her and got them put up on the walls and just created her place to try and, and make her feel comfortable. So that was just an example of what we do. It's not just all about, yeah, you're not in any pain anymore. I'll see you next week. It's not about that. It encompasses a lot more. So that was just one example that I could think of off the top of my head. That
Oh,
would be to show.
oh, well, I love hearing that example. I had a very personalized experience Lance and I did, and I always wondered if it was because you and I were friends or if that's the way that hospice is in general. And it sounds like that's just what hospice is like. And we took advantage of all the services except for the CNA because I was fortunate. I had already been Lance's caregiver for many years before we put him on hospice. And so I already had caregivers that were coming into the house, and I'd had that for more than a decade. So we didn't need the CNA services because we had that outside of the hospice agency. But we did use the chaplain and the social worker and the massage therapist and Lance. Another aspect of that too is that when you go on home hospice, you're not leaving your house anymore. And so it's really important to get those services in there because you're getting different people in there. And for Lance, he was such an extrovert that really fed his need for that time with people. And I'm really, really thankful for all the people and the services that were included in hospice for that reason.
Another one I just thought of, well, because I was thinking about Steve, the physical therapist that you had when he was on home health. And there's been a few times where people have come home from the hospital and we call it deconditioning, where they've been sat in the bed for, 2 weeks straight. And they came in, they came into the hospital being able to walk, and now they can't because they've been hooked up to this, that, and the other, and told to stay in bed, because it's unsafe. You can only do X, Y, Z. And they come home and they're so weak, but they're like, I just want to stand. I just want to walk again. And so when I've seen that this is what they're at, this is where they could be. I've even asked for the physical in order for the physical therapist to come in and do a few sessions on helping them acclimatize and build up strength and give them some exercises and things like that. So it's not like again, it's on quality of life. And if I see a thing there that enables them to get back. I remember one guy, I came to him, his bedroom, his bed had been put into the living room because we provide hospital beds, and it was in the living room. And he just said, so I came in and he just looked at me like, I just want to sit up. I just want to get out of bed. And I was taking a chance on like, oh, can I actually manually help this guy to get from one to the other? So I pulled the recliner right up close to the bed, and I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And got, because I was a CNA, I could do that. Is and knew the ergonomics to get him from A to B. And I managed to get him up and sit him in his chair, and he about cried. I mean, he just like, he got all emotional, going, oh, I'm sitting in my own chair. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it can be that simple, but that impactful to go from, just from a change. So that was, obviously was when I got the physical therapist in and said, okay, we're going to work on this. And we did, and he was able to get up so he could start walking around a bit. So
These stories are just going to make me cry. This is just so it really, hospice is so much about quality of life at the end of life. And you did talk about somebody coming back into the home after having been in the hospital. And I'm assuming that this is someone who was on hospice and had to go to the hospital. What happens in those cases where somebody needs to go to the hospital? What happens with hospice and how does that all work?
yeah. So if there's a situation where if it's pain related and it's just out of control, and I'm just talking to me personally, I've done everything I can that I know that is my disposal to manage the pain, and it's not being managed, then that would be the time we would say, okay, let's go to the hospital and see if there's something else that extenuating that maybe not is not related to what's going on with the terminal illness. So we will go if it is, so technically speaking, if it is related, if sent to the hospital and you find it is related to the hospice diagnosis, what would happen is we revoke services. And then that way the services drop from hospice, so Medicare payments go from the hospice to the hospital. So the patient's not getting billed, that Medicare will pick that up, or their insurance or what have you. Um, if it's not related to the hospice service, say if they fell and they need to go and get an x-ray and find out they've got a broken arm, or if they need stitches, it's not related to the hospice diagnosis, then they stay on services. They're there to get fixed up and then they come home. When they do come home, if they were revoked services and they do come home, then we reinstate them into back onto the program. So that's invariably what happens. There is the occasional case where we're finding that the person is continually going because for whatever reason they feel like we can't meet their needs and we're finding this to be an ongoing thing, then we're like, then you're not of the hospice philosophy. So we just need to part ways and you need to do what you need to do for your what's helpful.
But in most instances, it would be more a paperwork thing. So you're not
Yeah.
actually taking hospice away from a patient. I think that's something that I don't know that I even asked that when Lance was on hospice, but I wasn't really aware of how that would work. So as long as it's just a paperwork thing, I think that
It is. Yeah, because invariably I will say, we'll see you when you get back. And that's reassuring to them that they're just being taken care of on the level that's needed, and we'll be here when you get back. So, mhm.
that's so good to know. Well, I know a lot of people choose home hospice like Lance and I did. What is the difference between hospice in a home and hospice in a facility?
Yeah, there are definitely differences, and some of them are pros, and some of them are say challenges, I guess we'd say. Um, Having a patient in a facility, such as a skilled nursing facility, the positive would be managed care 24/7 related to both the medical and the practical, such as meals provided, personal care provided, monitoring for safety would be 24/7. To me, the biggest benefit is the monitoring for safety. Um, the negative is having to abide by all the rules and regulations of the facility. The patient is not at home in their own environment. The choice of food is limited to the facility. No changes in meds can be made without the orders in the system. For instance, if a patient needs an antibiotic, they can't give it to that patient until that order has been inputted into the system. I've even delivered it to the facility so we can get this thing going. And they're like, I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it until it's not in the computer. And I'm going, I'm pulling my hair out. But that's just, legality wise, I get it, but that's one of the challenges. And whereas if you're at home and I've gone to get, or I've had a stat delivery, right away, as soon as it comes, the patient can get that medication on board and get moving. So, like if I'm in the home and this person's got edema, they're on 20 milligrams of Lasix, but they need to double it to 40 milligrams to get this moving. I can literally hand give it to them right there and then because I've received the order for it personally from the doctor. Whereas the facility, now it's got to go all through the channels and they might not get it for another 5 hours, until it's gone through the system. So that's just my personal experience and frustration, but I totally get it. They're within their legal bounds, and you just have to know that that's the way the system works. I really appreciate the facilities when they're appropriate for say a person has dementia and they're so far advanced that they are not safe by themselves, or they've got an elderly couple that the spouse is no longer able to take care of that patient. The facility provides the level of care that is helpful with monitoring for their safety and things like that. So they all have their place and there's benefits to either one. Assisted living facilities have their place and are appropriate until the patient requires an increased level of care. Unfortunately, I've observed it personally where changes in the level of care have been delayed and patients have not received the care that they've needed at the appropriate time in their illness. But I'm not by no means blaming solely on the facilities. They can be just, family circumstances where I've seen it where the family is comfortable for where the patient's at. They don't want to see change. And it's like, but they need help getting out of bed. They need help 24/7 for their safety. And I've had a lot of pushback from the family. I'm like, how many times does the patient have to fall before you're realizing they really can't stay by themselves and they are a liability to the facility because it's an assisted, not dependent, help. So getting that transfer or that, you know, get them used to the idea that changes do need to be made. Um, but cross that bridge when you get to it.
You did mention antibiotics and Lasix. So I think one of the common misconceptions about hospice is that there are no more medications at all. And I know
Oh,
that's not true. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that is so true. Because I hate to say it, but even doctors will tell them, well, once you go on hospice, that's it. All your medications are going to be taken away. And and then I'm not lying, that's what they've been told. And so it's kind of distressing to hear that that's I won't say all, some doctors, that's what they think, because it's always a surprise to the patient and the family members when we're admitting them and to say, okay, I need to see all your medications so I know what we're going to reorder when it needs to be. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, we continue your medications until we see otherwise that they're not needed. Like, for instance, someone who's on Lasix, um, will now start losing weight and their blood pressure drops and now and they're not getting edema. They don't need that Lasix. So there'll be a change in medication. Blood pressure medication, if they've got a weight loss or things have just changed, will no longer need the blood pressure medication. So I'm not taking it away to shorten their lifespan. I'm doing it because I don't want their blood pressure dropping below 100, systolically. I want to keep it to a therapeutic level. So that means I need to decrease their blood pressure medication. Diabetes is another one. When you start seeing their appetite changing and they're no longer wanting or needing, they no longer desire to have the amount of food that they're eating or the kinds of food. So they start losing weight. It affects their blood glucose levels. They're not needing that amount of insulin a day. So I work with the doctor, hospice doctor, to bring those levels down, to meet therapeutic levels, and then that way they stay feeling good and are not having to worry about dropping under 70 in the middle of the night and wondering why they feel nauseous or dizzy and, that kind of thing. So, yeah, to me, it's about quality of life. It's not about quantity. And just because you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness, that immediately is we stop everything, put you on morphine, and we expect you to die in 6 months. It's like it doesn't work that way. Yeah, I want to keep them healthy as feeling as best they can in the time frame that God has given them.
And this is such an important time for family and friends too, to be able to spend time with them and good quality time and say their goodbyes.
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure.
So really it's about the medications. They can be on the medications that keep them comfortable. They're just not on any treatments. If they have cancer, they're not taking chemo pills anymore.
No, no. Um, Caveat to that is I've seen it when a couple of instances where the person's, got tumors going on related to cancer and they've usually been through the VA and they've gone to receive therapy that shrinks the tumor. It's not curing it, but it does provide relief and can provide comfort. So I've had it where a couple of, usually in this instance, it was a couple of guys that had lung cancer and it was able to shrink, keep it at a comfortable level. and they've gone to get their treatments once or twice a month, and it will play out. It's not going to stop them from that progression eventually, but it keeps them comfortable for a little while longer. And so we're open to that. That's not unheard of, but invariably, yeah, the treatments are no longer viable for them. Um, I've had it with people have cancer, and when we're talking about coming home and then things changing for the better, and invariably I've seen it when people have come home and they've just had the chemotherapy that they've been taking. Has just become so toxic to them that it's created storms in edema, congestive heart failure, just all the other systems in their body have just started to wig out, and it's created now a visit to the hospital and an ER situation. And then that's when, oh, we can't handle it anymore. And they look like they're at death's door. They come home thinking this is it. Families all gathered around, and it's gone into a couple of weeks, and the toxicity levels have decreased because they're no longer taking chemo, and they're starting to feel a whole lot better. And so they think, oh my God, oh, we're cured. I'm like, no, no, no. It's like you've just been so used to having the chemo and the effects from it that it's no longer there. So you're starting to feel better, but you've still got the cancer. But I always tell them to enjoy it. Go do what you're gonna do. What was on your plan? Your bucket list, so to speak. Let's do that, because here's your window for you feeling better from the aftermath of chemo, but you're going to progress eventually with your cancer. So you have to have those talks, because you get a lot of false hopes from family members, especially, which is like, oh, I don't want to break the news to you, but this is invariably what happens. So we're able to educate and help them seize the moment for doing something fun.
I think that's great. That's something that you helped us with too. We weren't thinking that Lance was going to live longer, but you did help us seize the moment. One last thing that we wanted to do. So we can talk about
Mhm.
that in the next episode, though, when we talk
Yeah.
a little bit more about our friendship.
Mhm. That'd be great.
You've been a hospice nurse for several years. I'm curious what drew you to that. And once you got into it, what is it that has kept you there?
So people have asked me more than once over the years, how could I possibly do this job? I would truly believe it's a calling, and certainly not for everyone. When you see so much death and dying, it would normally affect a person negatively, but I do believe God places a mantle on you to help you cope and be there for the patient and the family. I've had my moments, but managed to hold it together until I've left the house. There have been many times when I've been in the home for many months, and become close to the patient and the family. When the patient has passed, it has been appropriate to have a cry with the family, but remain composed to be of service to them. I have a story that goes with that question. I became a home health nurse first, and I was to home health for a couple of years. And then we have in our agency the same office space, where one office is for home health and the other one is for hospice agency, the hospice side of it. Anyway, I got talking to a hospice nurse one day and asking her, like, what does it really mean to be a hospice nurse? I didn't even really know. And she's like, well, to the point where she's like, well, why don't you just do a ride along with me? And I'm like, okay. So I got the okay from our bosses, and I went off to spend the day with her and to really see what it encompassed, and what all we're doing that, obviously chatting and filling me with some more details on what it means. Well, I had this one particular lady that I really saw could have the benefits of the hospice, and so I came up with the idea that I would become a hospice nurse and join that department. And I even told my patient, she was this 90-year-old French lady, and I said, okay, if I become a hospice nurse, will you come with me? Go from home health to hospice. And that was the only way she was going to happen. But had it in my mind that this is what I was supposed to do. So I went ahead and transitioned over, and she came with me. Up until that point, she had been independent, living on her own. She was, I would say, quite a stubborn person. She was in her 90s and shorter than me, and I'm 5 foot. So she was like 4 foot something. I told her, I said, oh, I blame your stubbornness on being French, but that's because I'm English, because I could get away with it. She, she would come when I would walk in the door, she would curtsy as like I'm royalty. I'd be like,
I
so
love
she would make the cup of tea and I'd bring the biscuits. So we would sit and have a conversation. That's how our visits went. We have to get quite creative sometimes, but it worked. And she did agree to come on hospice. I knew that that's what she needed. She had two living sons. One lived nearby, but one lived out of state. Both the sons were not talking to each other for whatever reason. And she told me that she said, if nothing else, I would love to see it with my sons around me when I die. And so part of my job, I don't think you know if it's written in fine print somewhere, but I did. I called both of them and said, this is the situation, and this is what your mom would like to see happen. And one of them, the one that was from out of state, I had to become a quite a firm conversation with him to make him see just the importance of what it was meaning to his mom to be there. So I didn't know if I'd made any headway, but I came to visit one day and both of them were there. Both of them were around the bedside. And she was very weak, and I knew it was going to be any time, any day now. And so I went up to her. I was like, it just melted my heart to see. It was like, oh, we did it. And I went up to her to say goodbye, to say good night, because it was late in the evening. And I said, I'll see you tomorrow, because she was on daily visits by this time. And she reached out, gave me a hug, and she said, thank you for everything that you've done. It means the world to me, but I won't be here tomorrow. And she died later on that night. Oh, I was just like, oh my gosh. So that was my first patient. She was on hospice for 2 weeks. And yeah, I mean, it was that shorter time frame that we were looking at. So a lot of times you feel moved to make certain decisions and walk things a certain way, navigate things a certain way. And that was the beginning of my 9-year career as being a hospice nurse. Oh.
that.
So you're asking about what keeps me passionate about my job is really being able to help people. I never took it for granted. People were putting their trust in me at one of the most vulnerable times in their lives. I remember a patient who was around 50 years old with cancer, and his wife very attentive to taking care of him. This is not about lamps, by the way. It's another patient. Um, and she asked me, she said, so what are you going to do for us? And I briefly explained about pain management, about practical care, etc. But she kept asking me, no, what are you actually going to do to help us? And I didn't have the heart to tell her actually what was going to happen. And I knew he was going to experience increased pain, weakness, nausea, vomiting, no appetite, weight loss. He was going to become bedridden with increasingly decreased bodily functions, require increased level of care. I couldn't say all those things to her right there and then. One, it'd be such a shock and it would scare her. And she would probably think that in some way that maybe it was because he was on hospice as to how why this was happening. Um, but I told her what I did tell her was I emphasize obviously pain management and things like that. But I told her I needed to get to know them. Even though he was still walking and somewhat independent, I needed that time in this time frame to get to know them. I needed to know what worked for husbands in pain management, what was important to them. And soon as the services, they spoke about wishing that they could go out of town to a family cabin. And I've been able to get his pain managed well enough that he felt comfortable to leave home and go on this trip. And they did. They went. All the symptoms I spoke about, loss of appetite, weight loss, etc., happened. And after he passed away, she told me how thankful she was. We were there for them, and now she knew how I was able to help them, of what hospice was all about. And so I kept, yeah, I was just so glad that that happened and that she could see it. But like I said, yeah, we know what's going to happen, but you've just got to figure out a way to let them know and be helpful. We encourage people to attain their last wishes. It's one of my favorite things I like to see happen. Over the years, we've partnered with a charity organization, Angels Anonymous, and they provided the funds. Um, and it's heartwarming to see helping people in their many capacities, donating not just money, but their time and their talents and their energy to bringing to fruition the- these these goals and wishes. I've seen people take an airplane ride, go on this hike I mean, a hike, but they were supported around people to make this happen because it was the one thing that they wanted to do. Um, so I love it when I'm a coast person. I love the beach. So invariably they'd be like, "Oh, we want to do one last trip to the coast." I'm like, "Yes, we're on it. I want you to get there too. Even have to drive you myself." And I work with a great social worker, Rick, who has no nose bounds to make it happen. We also look into partnering with a hospice agency, at the designated place so that they've got the resources around them if there's an emergency, that they've got immediate help. It's just them knowing that they've got a lifeline to where they're at. Also, I've worked, maybe they're in a hotel room or an Airbnb and they need a hospital bed. So I've gotten it. So I've worked with the vendors in that town and to deliver a hospital bed or oxygen concentrator instead of lugging one halfway across in their tiny car, that kind of thing. So there's different things that we can do, but I've really appreciated that part of the program. Um, and that keeps me engaged in just helping, like I said, just helping people. And it's not just keeping them pain managed and okay, call me in a couple of days, or if it doesn't work. To me, it's all facets of their life uh that I appreciate and just what I enjoy doing, truly.
I can say that you're very good at it. And everyone who has had you as their hospice nurse, whether it was the patient or the patient's caregiver, so lucky to have you. I am
Thank you.
eternally grateful to you for everything that you did for us. And you talking about the end of life wishes, we did get to do that with Lance, but I want to talk about that in our next episode. I've got a couple more questions for you. But that service to us, that was incredible. And is that something that all hospice agencies provide, or is it just specific to your agency and individual agencies just make that decision to do that?
Um, to be honest, I'm not that familiar with other agencies. Um, I just know that we just had a really special group of people that love to go out and beyond, to me, the beyond of Call of Duty to provide services like that.
I just recorded a couple of episodes with an EMS fire chief there, and he he and I were having a conversation about home health and hospice and talking about the vast differences in the agencies. And one of the things that I would like to encourage people to do, if you're listening to this because you're considering hospice, shop around, interview the agencies to make sure that you are with the agency that you belong with, because not everyone's going to click, and you might end up with an agency that you feel like they are not the right one for you. And if something like that happens, you can change agencies, but it's not as easy as if you went through the process of interviewing first and then decided on one and stuck with them.
I've been to a few interviews by people who are literally shopping, and I've been told, hey, you need to go see this couple. They're looking at different agencies and they really would like to see the person that's actually going to be taking care of them. So it's not a representative of the agency. They wanted to see me because I was going to be the nurse for them. And yes, talk about pressure. But I have to say, I usually got the job.
I'm not surprised.
Oh. I'll toot my own horn on that one. Oh dear. That was fun. But yeah, but I don't blame them at all. And I appreciated that. Like you said, it's a lot easier to just to do the shopping first than transferring from one to another after you found out, oops, we blew it. We didn't make the right decision. Because yeah, it can make a difference. It really can.
Yeah,
I've just appreciated the agency that I've worked for that have enabled me to have the autonomy to do what I do. They're not on my neck saying, well, you spent X amount of minutes in this person's home. That's too many. We've got you to, you need to see X, so many people a day. And, I feel like you're on a treadmill. They give me the autonomy to go, okay, so I'm obviously not going to spend all day at someone's house, but if it goes into an hour or two, because that's what's needed. There was one instance, off the top of my head, I'm thinking, um, where I walked into this person's house or an apartment, right? This guy is on his unresponsive, as in he's near dying. And I was told that the neighbor had decided that she was going to take care of him. And he was a lot young, she was a lot younger, so she had the ability to do it. And he was, when he came on services, I mean, he was upright in a chair, able to transfer. And for some reason, she decided when it push came to shove, and he was now on his deathbed, that she literally, I came and she's like, I'm out of here. I can't do this anymore. And walked out. He had no family around. So guess what? I couldn't leave. I could not leave. And so I called so my supervisor and I'm like, I've got so many people that to see so far. It was like halfway through the day, and it says, and I cannot leave this house. This person's actively dying, dependent, and there's nobody. It would be an abandonment in my books. And to show the extent of our agency, we got literally around the clock care for this person. And the chaplain came, the social worker came, Angels Anonymous put in money to hire a caregiver to take him overnight. The bath aide would come, I would come. We did this for like 3 or 4 days until the patient passed away. And we did not leave that person's side. So there's instances where you're literally put on the spot. I'm like, I can't leave. But we follow through in taking care of that person.
Well, I think that that's a really important point to make when you're choosing a home hospice agency or just any hospice agency, wherever you're at, that it's really important to think about the questions. And it's so hard to do that when you're in the situation where you need hospice because your mind is not thinking about that. Your mind is thinking about what is coming.
Hmm.
And so maybe at some point you and I could do an episode. I don't have anything planned right now, but if we get enough people asking for it, maybe we could sit down and come up with some questions that people could ask when they're looking for an agency. Because even if you get a recommendation from somebody for an agency, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're tied to that agency. If your insurance will cover a whole bunch of different agencies and you have the ability to choose, I would highly recommend that you choose the one that works for you because it is such a time of just really a lot of difficulty. And you want to make sure that you click with the people who are in and out of your house, because if you don't, then it's going to make that situation that much harder for you.
And can I put in a situation where for skilled nursing facilities? So skilled nursing facilities are will invariably favor one agency over another. There's cliques out there, and they will tell the patient who's now going on hospice, and they're in the skilled nursing facility, and they will imply that they've only got one choice, and it's the people that they technically work with, and that is not so. You have a choice and you can say, yeah, that's you, but I know I want these people over here. And by law, they have to abide and they have to allow that other agency into the facility. So patient and family members need to know that they do have choices, even in facilities. Yeah, whether it's an assisted living or a skilled nursing facility. They don't have to go with the person, agency that they've so-called partnered with. That's just their own preference. And
That's really good to know. I'm glad that you brought that up.
yeah, yeah.
Well, for someone just starting to consider hospice for a loved one or for themselves, what's one thing you wish they knew to feel more at ease about the decision?
One thing I wish people knew about hospice while considering to starting services is the help that it brings to relieve caregivers, especially. The support that comes with it. A skilled nurse and an aide will usually have a wealth of experience to teach and guide them during this time. Social worker to help navigate with resources in the community, to help with legal resources, putting affairs in order, a chaplain to assist with spiritual and emotional needs. A volunteer program is part of the service. Someone to come and stay with that patient and give relief to the caregivers. And I've also talked about a massage therapist is usually included. It's just a great network of people in the community that people don't realize is there at their fingertips, and if they qualify for Medicare, it's free. I always tell patients and their families, anything that I'm going to bring up to provide, there is no cost. I will never bring something up with a dollar sign tagged to it. And so they don't have to worry about, oh, is she saying this because it's going to cost me X, Y, and Z. From this day forth, anything that comes out of my mouth is going to be free. You don't have to worry about that. And you've got these seniors on fixed incomes, and it's such a relief to know that anything that I'm providing, I mean, even if to the down to the of providing cares products such as needing hygiene products, that's provided as part of the service, things like that. Um, the one thing I hear more than anything is people wished they'd made that decision to come on hospice sooner. They're like, oh, why didn't we know about this like 6 months ago? I went, I know, right? But they may have, but they just weren't in that headspace to think about it as being an option. But yeah, I've never heard anyone say, "Gosh, I wished we hadn't done this." It's always been, "I wish we'd done it sooner." So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it does provide peace and comfort that you're not getting until you go into that service. I know that for us, when I put him on hospice, when we put him on hospice, we made the decision together. It was not an easy decision, and it took a few months for us to finally make the appointment. But when it finally, the day that it began, I journaled about this, just the immense peace that I felt knowing, and just watching him too, realizing that he didn't have to leave the house anymore for appointments, and that if he didn't feel well, if he felt like something was really wrong, that we were going to keep him comfortable at home. There were no more calls to 911. There were no more trips to the emergency room. And it was hard. I'm not going to lie, but it
No.
was, yeah, it was the best thing. I'm so glad that he had that available to him, that we had it available to us for the last 11 months of his life. I can look back on that and I can see the opportunity to spend quality time with him, to have those conversations that maybe we hadn't had yet, which in our case, we pretty much talked about everything, but just
Mhm.
to let him know that he was the most important person in the world, and just to have that time to say goodbye. It was precious time that I'm so glad I had.
It's a really I like being able to come into a person's home and help that caregiver become the person, the spouse, become the daughter, become the son, and not solely the caregiver. And sometimes it takes some pulling and tugging to get the person to give it up.
Like me, you mean?
Yeah.
But it was so ingrained in me though. I'd been
Well,
his
that's just
friend
it. It becomes
for,
a way of life.
yeah.
And they forget or they feel, and I'm really not saying just you, they really identify only by being the caregiver that they've forgotten what it's like. They put sole importance into that caregiving role that when I come in and I suggest that the bath aide come in and give that person a bath instead of them, they're like, but like, what am I going to do? This is my job. I says, we are going to do everything that you normally used to doing. I said, we can't do everything, but we will relieve you as much as we can so that you can then become the daughter, become the become that wife, the husband, so that you can spend that time being that person. And so give you a break. And so once they start going, oh, okay, it's amazingly, you thought,
Well, you know what's so funny? I know that you did that for me, but I don't know that I realized that that's what you were doing. And you're so right. When you've been a caregiver for a long time, you lose your identity. And that was my identity. I was Lance's caregiver. I had forgotten that I was his wife. And
yeah,
so for those last 11 months, I was able to, even though he had really bad memory loss, I was able to relay some of the memories of our life together during that time. And he really enjoyed hearing them, even if he didn't remember them.
yeah, no, but you had that time to talk about it. You weren't worrying about other things. You knew that the medication was coming or the facility, things were being provided that supports or yeah, so it just took your mind off of those things and go, so you did get to spend that time talking about those memories where it should be. So that's yeah, that's what I enjoy seeing. But that's over the years, right? For me, from day one, walking into my little lady that was 4'10" and speaking French, you know, to now, um, you have to be able to you just gain that knowledge and you gain that experience and you realize what is important go walking into those homes. So
Well, we've talked about a lot and we've got another episode planned. But before we end this episode, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to add?
yeah, there was a part where I just wanted to, for me personally, is my first choice when I walk into a home is to advocate for the patient to stay in the home. Um, Most of the times it's possible, but families don't realize the things that are there at their disposal to make that happen. And so when I can start telling them about the ability that things that the hospice can provide, such as we work with the DME equipment, durable medical equipment is what it stands for. So we work with vendors that can provide a hospital bed, that they're going from a California king to, that doesn't move, that's X amount, high off the ground. And they're needing help on both sides of the bed. So I can provide a hospital bed, or I should say it's an adjustable bed, to move up and down, has the ability to help them on both sides of the bed and they can sit up and watch TV or eat in bed or lay down. They can elevate their legs up so that they can relieve that edema. Um, they provide a shower chair so they can able to have a shower and sit down. We can provide a wheelchair that's small enough for them to get around the house. It's not this cumbersome wheelchair that you use outside. There's a lot of different things, a bedside commode, so they don't have to go all the way across down the hall to the bathroom. So there's a lot of things that they don't realize that's at their disposal. So we can create an environment that is helpful. I would say conserving energy. And sometimes, I'll get it so that the patient's like, I don't want to use that bedside commode. And I'm like, okay, sir, you have X amount of energy. What are you going to spend it on? You want to spend it on getting down the hall to the bathroom, or you can hop from your bed to the chair, back to bed, and then enjoy sitting and having a conversation and eating a meal because you still got that energy there. So you can have those educating conversations. Oh
I don't
dear.
think I ever heard you talk to us like that, Sharon.
What's I didn't have to call you sir. That tells you who I'm usually having those conversations with. But I can show the patient and the family that we can create the environment that will be helpful to them. They don't have to go to a hospital. They don't have to go to an assisted living. They can stay at home. And to me, they can have their cake and eat it too. They can have the best of both worlds. They can have a home where the family can come and go. They can eat that chocolate cake if they want to, and they're, it's funny because you get family that are like, oh, but it's not good for them. I'm like, they're 96. They're going to pass away in the next few months. If chocolate cake is what they want and ice cream for dinner, go for it. I, I don't want to see lettuce on their plates. I want to see a hunk of chocolate cake. No, so definitely education, but because they're in their own home, they can have that option and that choice. So that's my first choice as a person for me as a hospice nurse. I will do everything in my power to make that possible if that's what they truly, truly want. And then again to tell them like, and if it doesn't work, then we'll go to plan B. but ultimately you will appreciate. Because I'll tell even family members, I'll be like, do you want to spend your day driving back and forth? Because you know you're not going to be able to stay away because you want to know that that person's happy and that their needs are being met. So you really want to do this, or do you want to give it a shot and see if you can make the home work? And usually that's what they'll do.
So they can start off with home hospice and
Yeah, that's what I said. In fact, yes, absolutely. And if it really doesn't work and they're just not, some people just are not cut out to be caregivers, and they'll soon find out, ooh, this is really, really not me, or I really can't do it. I really need them to go into a facility and have their needs taken care of on that level. Fine. But I've given them that option and that choice and that opportunity to find out. And there's no judgment on my part at all. I just don't want them to miss that opportunity and wish they had, because it's harder to get them back home.
right. Right. Well, Sharon, this has been such great information. I know that this is going to be helpful to so many people. A lot of this is information that I wish that I had had before going into hospice, but you were so good about providing this as we walked through it together. And I'm really, really grateful for you for the time that you spent with us while Lance was alive and the time since then. And thanks so much for being here. I will see you in our next episode.
You're welcome. Thank you.